The morning sun cast a golden glow over Windsor Castle as staff members rushed through the corridors, making final preparations for what would become one of the most talked-about royal celebrations of the year. King Charles III was turning 75, and the palace had planned an evening that would blend tradition with personal touches that reflected the monarch's unique style. In her private chambers at Kensington Palace, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before a team of trusted stylists who had arrived hours earlier to help her prepare for the momentous occasion. The relationship between Catherine and her father-in-law had always been one of mutual respect and genuine warmth. Over the years since her marriage to Prince William, she had proven herself not just as a future queen consort, but as someone who understood the delicate balance between duty and authenticity that royal life demanded. King Charles had watched her navigate challenging situations with grace, raise 3 children under intense public scrutiny, and support causes that aligned with her values while respecting centuries of protocol. Tonight's celebration would be particularly meaningful because it represented not just a milestone birthday, but also the first major royal gathering since Charles had ascended to the throne following the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Catherine's stylist, Natasha Archer, had worked closely with her for over a decade and understood the princess's preference for elegant simplicity with strategic moments of grandeur. For this evening, they had selected a gown that would make a statement while honoring the celebratory nature of the occasion. The dress, designed by one of Britain's most celebrated fashion houses, featured a delicate pink silk fabric that seemed to capture and reflect light with every movement. The color had been chosen deliberately as pink represented both femininity and strength, qualities that Catherine embodied in her public role. As the team helped her into the gown, Catherine reflected on her journey within the royal family. She remembered the nervous young woman who had stood beside William on their wedding day, uncertain about whether she truly belonged in this world of ancient traditions and constant public attention. Her parents, Michael and Carol Middleton, had raised her with strong values and a solid work ethic, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the reality of becoming one of the most photographed women in the world. Yet she had found her footing, drawing strength from William's unwavering support and from her own determination to make a meaningful difference through her royal platform. The pink gown featured a fitted bodice that highlighted Catherine's elegant frame, with intricate beading along the neckline that caught the light beautifully. The skirt flowed gracefully to the floor, creating a silhouette that was both timeless and modern. What made the dress truly special was the subtle incorporation of embroidered flowers along the hemline, each one representing a different aspect of King Charles's passionate advocacy for environmental conservation and organic farming. This thoughtful detail was exactly the kind of gesture that Catherine excelled at, finding ways to honor others while maintaining her own distinctive style. As her hair was styled into soft waves that framed her face, Catherine thought about the tiara she would wear tonight. The palace had given her access to several options from the royal collection, each with its own history and significance. After much consideration, she had chosen the Lover's, not tiara, a piece that had once belonged to Princess Diana and had become one of Catherine's signature accessories for formal occasions. The tiara featured 19 diamond arches, each topped with a hanging pearl, creating a delicate yet impressive display of royal craftsmanship. Wearing it tonight felt like a way to honor William's mother while celebrating his father, creating a connection across generations. Her makeup artist applied subtle enhancement that would photograph beautifully in the candlelit ballroom while looking natural in person. Catherine had always preferred a lighter touch with cosmetics, believing that authenticity mattered more than perfection. The team added a soft pink tone to her lips that complemented the gown, and a gentle highlight to her cheekbones that would catch the camera flashes without appearing too dramatic. Every detail was considered carefully, knowing that photographs from tonight would be analyzed by fashion critics and royal watchers around the world. In another wing of Windsor Castle, King Charles was putting the finishing touches on his own appearance, wearing formal evening attire with military decorations that honored his decades of service. He had specifically requested that tonight's celebration feel personal rather than overly ceremonial, wanting to share the evening with family and close friends who had supported him throughout his life. The guest list included members of the extended royal family, longtime friends from his various charitable endeavors, and representatives from organizations he had championed over the years. Prince William helped his 3 children prepare for the evening, explaining to George, Charlotte, and Louis the significance of their grandfather's birthday and what the celebration would entail. The children had made handmade cards for their grandfather, Charlotte spending hours perfecting her drawing of King Charles's beloved garden at Highgrove. These personal touches meant more to the king than any expensive gift, reflecting his belief that genuine sentiment mattered far more than material displays. As Catherine prepared to leave Kensington Palace, she took a final look in the mirror. The woman staring back at her had evolved significantly from the young bride, who had nervously waved to crowds from the Buckingham Palace balcony. She had found her voice as an advocate for early childhood development, mental health awareness, and the importance of outdoor play for children's well-being. She had weathered storms of media criticism and emerged stronger, more confident in her role and purpose within the institution. Tonight, she would step into Windsor Castle not as an outsider who had married into royalty, but as a beloved member of the family who had earned her place through dedication, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to service. The journey to Windsor took less than an hour, but Catherine used the time to center herself and prepare mentally for the evening ahead. She knew that every gesture would be photographed, every interaction analyzed for signs of family dynamics or potential tensions. The reality of royal life meant that even genuine celebrations carried the weight of public performance, where spontaneity had to be balanced with awareness of how moments would be perceived and interpreted by millions of people watching around the world. The motorcade carrying Catherine and William arrived at Windsor Castle. Just as the evening sky began to transform into shades of purple and orange, security personnel had cordoned off the routes leading to the castle. The crowds of well-wishers had gathered along the barriers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family arriving for the celebration. As Catherine stepped out of the vehicle, a collective gasp arose from the onlookers. The pink gown shimmered under the early evening lights, and the lover's knot tiara sparkled brilliantly, creating an image that would dominate newspaper front pages and social media feeds for days to come. Catherine smiled warmly at the crowd, offering a small wave that struck the perfect balance between acknowledging their enthusiasm and maintaining the dignity appropriate for the occasion. She had learned over the years how to connect with people, even in brief moments, understanding that these small gestures of recognition meant a great deal to those who had waited hours in the cold for a chance to see the royal family. William walked beside her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back in a subtle gesture of support and affection that photographers captured from multiple angles. Inside Windsor Castle, the state dining room had been transformed into a spectacular venue that reflected King Charles's personal aesthetic preferences, rather than the traditional formal arrangements that might have been expected for a royal birthday celebration. The king had requested a warmer, more intimate atmosphere. Hundreds of candles flickered on tables adorned with flowers from the gardens at Highgrove, Charles's beloved country estate. The floral arrangements featured organic blooms in autumn colors, celebrating the season and the king's lifelong commitment to sustainable gardening practices. As Catherine and William entered the reception area, they were greeted by Queen Camilla, who looked elegant in a deep emerald gown with sapphire jewelry that had once belonged to the Queen Mother. The two women embraced warmly, the relationship having evolved from initial awkwardness to genuine friendship over the years. Camilla had come to deeply appreciate Catherine's steadying influence on William and her dedication to the family's reputation. They spoke briefly about the children, with Camilla expressing delight at the handmade cards she had already seen, describing them as the highlight of Charles's gifts. The guest list represented a fascinating cross-section of British society and international dignitaries. Members of European royal families who had maintained close relationships with the British monarchy stood alongside environmental activists who had worked with King Charles on climate initiatives. Artists whose work the king had championed mingled with military veterans from regiments he had served with during his younger years. The mix created a dynamic energy in the room, with conversations ranging from agricultural policy to contemporary art. From military history to childhood education, Catherine moved through the room with practiced ease, engaging in conversation with various guests and making each person feel valued and heard. She spent several minutes speaking with a group of representatives from the Prince's Trust, the charitable organization that Charles had founded decades earlier to help disadvantaged young people build better futures. Catherine listened intently as they described recent success stories, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in their work. This ability to connect authentically with people from all backgrounds had become one of her greatest strengths as a member of the royal family. Prince Harry and his wife had not attended the celebration, their ongoing estrangement from the family casting a subtle shadow over what was otherwise a joyous occasion. Catherine felt the absence keenly, remembering happier times when the two brothers had been inseparable and family gatherings had felt complete. She knew that William struggled with the rift, torn between his loyalty to the institution and his love for his brother. Yet tonight was about celebrating King Charles, and Catherine was determined to ensure that the focus remained on honoring the monarch rather than dwelling on family divisions that might never be fully resolved. When King Charles made his entrance, the room erupted in applause. He looked genuinely moved by the turnout and the obvious affection displayed by those gathered to celebrate him. At 75, he finally held the position he had waited his entire life to assume. Yet the role came with complexities and challenges he had never fully anticipated. The death of his mother had been deeply painful, and the responsibility of carrying forward her legacy, while establishing his own vision for the monarchy, weighed heavily on him. Having Catherine and William's unwavering support made the burden more bearable. The king made his way through the room, greeting guests personally and sharing warm exchanges that revealed his encyclopedic knowledge of people's lives and work. When he reached Catherine, his face lit up with genuine warmth. He took both her hands in his and told her how beautiful she looked. Commenting specifically on her choice to wear the lover's knot tiara, the moment carried emotional weight for both of them, a recognition of the woman whose absence was still felt profoundly within the family, and an acknowledgement of Catherine's grace in honoring that memory while creating her own legacy. The formal dinner featured a menu that reflected King Charles's commitment to organic, locally sourced ingredients. The first course was a delicate soup made from vegetables grown at Highgrove, followed by main courses that showcased British farming at its finest. Between courses, several guests rose to offer toasts and share anecdotes about the king's life and work. Some stories were humorous, revealing Charles's quirky sense of humor and his willingness to laugh at himself. Others were deeply touching, describing moments when his intervention had changed lives or his advocacy had pushed important causes forward against significant resistance. Catherine found herself particularly moved by a speech from a young woman who had benefited from the prince's trust during a difficult period in her life. The woman described how the organization's support had given her not just practical skills and employment opportunities, but also the confidence to believe in herself when others had written her off. She credited King Charles's vision and commitment for creating a program that saw potential in young people that society often overlooked. As she finished speaking, there were tears in many eyes throughout the room, including Catherine's. The dinner conversation at Catherine's table ranged across numerous topics. She sat between a distinguished environmental scientist who had worked with Charles on climate issues for decades and a celebrated portrait artist who had painted several members of the royal family. Catherine engaged with both equally, discussing everything from carbon sequestration strategies to the challenges of capturing personality in painted portraits. Her ability to hold intelligent conversations across diverse subject areas impressed those around her, demonstrating that she was far more than just a beautiful face in a stunning gown. After dinner, guests moved to the ballroom for dancing and further celebration. A small orchestra had been assembled, featuring musicians from organizations that King Charles had supported throughout his life. The music selection ranged from classical waltzes to more contemporary pieces, creating an atmosphere that honored tradition while embracing modernity. Catherine and William were among the first couples to take to the dance floor, their movements synchronized from years of practice at formal events. The pink gowns swirled beautifully as they moved, the beating catching the light from the chandeliers overhead, watching them dance. Many guests remarked on how natural they appeared together, how their partnership seemed to strengthen rather than diminish each individual. This had not always been guaranteed. When Catherine had first entered royal life, there were doubts about whether someone from her background could truly adapt to the rigid protocols and intense scrutiny that defined existence within the monarchy. Some courtiers had questioned whether William's choice of bride demonstrated poor judgment, whether he was prioritizing personal happiness over institutional requirements. Those doubts had been thoroughly dispelled over time as Catherine proved herself again and again. King Charles joined his son and daughter-in-law on the dance floor, dancing first with Queen Camilla and then requesting a dance with Catherine. As they moved together, spoke quietly to her about how proud he was of the woman she had become and the mother she was to his grandchildren. He told her that one of his greatest sources of comfort in accepting the responsibilities of kingship was knowing that William had such a capable and compassionate partner to share the journey. Catherine, typically reserved about receiving praise, felt genuinely touched by his words. She thanked him for the trust he had placed in her and for the example he had set in using royal position to advocate for causes that truly mattered. Princess Anne, the king's sister, stood at the edge of the dance floor watching the scene with approval. Anne had initially been skeptical of Catherine, viewing her as an outsider who might struggle with the demands of royal duty. But over the years, Anne had come to respect Catherine's work ethic and her genuine commitment to making a difference through her royal platform. The two women had developed a warm relationship based on mutual respect, with an occasionally offering advice drawn from her own decades of royal service. Tonight, Anne caught Catherine's eye across the room and raised her glass in a subtle gesture of acknowledgement and approval. The children had been allowed to stay for the earlier part of the evening, and they had created some of the celebration's most memorable moments. Prince George, now old enough to understand the significance of royal occasions, had behaved with impressive maturity throughout dinner. Princess Charlotte had charmed everyone she encountered with her confidence and natural sociability. Prince Louis the youngest had provided comic relief with his enthusiastic reactions to the festivities. When it came time for them to leave with their nanny, King Charles personally escorted them out, bending down to receive hugs and listen to their excited chatter about the evening as the evening progressed. Catherine found herself in conversation with several other members of the extended royal family. The Duchess of Edinburgh shared updates about her recent charitable work. They discussed the challenges of balancing public duties with family responsibilities. Prince Edward joined them, offering his perspective on how to maintain authenticity while fulfilling the performative aspects of royal life. These conversations held particular value for Catherine because they came from people who understood the unique pressures she faced in ways that even close friends from her pre-royal life could not fully grasp. Throughout the evening, photographers captured countless images that would be released to the media in carefully curated selections. The palace communications team understood that public interest in the royal family remained high, and strategic sharing of photographs from events like this helped maintain positive relationships with the press while controlling the narrative around the monarchy. Catherine had learned to be constantly aware of cameras without appearing self-conscious, a skill that seemed simple but required tremendous discipline and practice to execute naturally. One particularly striking photograph captured Catherine standing alone for a brief moment near a window, the pink gown illuminated by candlelight, the lover's knot tiara glittering, her expression thoughtful and serene. This image would later appear on magazine covers around the world, analyzed by fashion experts and used to illustrate articles about modern royalty. What the photograph could not capture was what Catherine was thinking in that moment, her private reflections on how far she had come, and the woman she had become through the challenges and triumphs of royal life. The celebration also provided a rare opportunity for Catherine to interact with extended family members she did not see regularly. Cousins, nieces, and nephews from various branches of the royal family were in attendance, creating a genuine family atmosphere that transcended the formality of the setting. Catherine made a point of speaking with younger relatives who were navigating their own relationships with royal heritage and public attention, offering encouragement and understanding born from her own experiences of finding her place within this extraordinary family. As midnight approached, King Charles prepared to cut the elaborate birthday cake that had been created by bakers, who had supplied the royal family for generations. The cake was a masterpiece of traditional craftsmanship, decorated with edible flowers and featuring 75 candles arranged in an elegant pattern. Before cutting the cake, Charles gave a brief speech thanking everyone for attending and reflecting on the privilege of reaching this milestone, surrounded by people he loved and respected. His words were characteristically thoughtful, touching on themes of duty, service, family, and the importance of using privilege to benefit others. Catherine stood beside William as the room sang Happy Birthday, her voice joining the chorus while her mind wandered briefly to her own children sleeping at Kensington Palace. She thought about the legacy being celebrated tonight and the future that George, Charlotte, and Louis would inherit. The weight of royal responsibility would eventually fall on George's shoulders, just as it had fallen on his grandfather's and would one day fall on his father's. But tonight was about honoring the present, celebrating a man who had waited longer than any heir in British history to become king and who had used those decades of waiting to champion causes and build organizations that had improved countless lives. The evening continued, with dancing and conversation flowing freely, the initial formality giving way to genuine warmth as the celebration progressed. Catherine kicked off her shoes briefly during a particularly lively dance with William, a small rebellion that would have been unthinkable at events earlier in her royal career, but that now felt perfectly appropriate. She had learned when protocol was essential and when it could be relaxed, understanding that authenticity and relatability were just as important as tradition in maintaining the monarchy's relevance in contemporary Britain. As the celebration moved into its later hours, smaller groups formed throughout Windsor Castle's magnificent rooms, with conversations becoming more intimate and personal. Catherine found herself in the music room with Queen Camilla and several other women who had married into the royal family over the decades. They shared stories and advice, creating a rare moment of solidarity among women who understood the unique challenges of supporting their royal spouses while carving out their own meaningful roles. Camilla spoke candidly about the long years she had spent being vilified by the press and how she had eventually found peace by focusing on her charitable work rather than trying to win popularity contests. The conversation turned to the practical realities of royal life that the public rarely considered. They discussed the exhaustion of maintaining perfect composure during hours-long engagements, the challenge of being constantly photographed and scrutinized, and the loneliness that could arise from occupying a position that very few people truly understood. Catherine contributed her own experiences, describing how she had learned to compartmentalize criticism and focus on the positive impact her work was having rather than dwelling on negative commentary. She admitted that learning to trust her own judgment rather than being paralyzed by fear of making mistakes had been one of her most important growth experiences. One of the older royal relatives shared wisdom gained from decades of service, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a strong sense of self separate from the royal role. She warned against allowing the institution to completely absorb individual identity, explaining that those who lost themselves in the role often struggled with depression and purposelessness. Catherine absorbed this advice thoughtfully, recognizing that she had instinctively protected certain aspects of her private life and personality, even while fully committing to her public responsibilities. Her dedication to her children's normal childhood experiences and her maintenance of relationships with pre-royal friends were part of this protective strategy. Meanwhile, in another room, William was engaged in serious conversation with his father about the future direction of the monarchy. King Charles had spent decades developing his vision for a more streamlined and efficient royal family that focused resources on core members, while reducing the number of people receiving public funding and performing official duties. William largely agreed with this approach, but had his own ideas about how to make the monarchy more relatable to younger generations while preserving its essential dignity and mystique. Their discussion reflected the healthy tension between respecting tradition and embracing necessary evolution. Catherine, rejoined William, as the evening began winding down. and they took a quiet moment together on one of Windsor Castle's terraces overlooking the grounds. The night air was cold, but refreshing after the warmth of the crowded ballroom. They stood close together, Catherine's head briefly resting on William's shoulder as they looked out at the landscape illuminated by moonlight. These stolen moments of genuine connection were precious, given the demands constantly placed on their time and attention. William commented on how beautiful she looked, not just physically, but in the grace and confidence she had displayed throughout the evening. They talked about the children and the importance of giving them as normal a childhood as possible, given the extraordinary circumstances of their birth. Both Catherine and William had benefited from relatively grounded upbringings, despite their privileged backgrounds, and they were determined to provide similar foundations for George, Charlotte, and Louis. This meant protecting them from excessive public exposure while gradually preparing them for the roles they would eventually assume. It meant teaching them about their heritage and responsibilities while ensuring they understood the importance of empathy, hard work, and service to others. The conversation shifted to more vulnerable territory. As William expressed his ongoing pain over the estrangement from Harry, Catherine listened with compassion, understanding that her husband carried grief not just for the current situation, but for the close brotherhood that had once existed and might never be fully restored. She offered no easy answers because none existed, instead, simply providing the supportive presence that William needed. Their relationship had always been characterized by this kind of emotional honesty, the ability to be vulnerable with each other, even when circumstances required them to project strength to the outside world. As they returned inside, they encountered several departing guests who stopped to thank them for their presence and to compliment Catherine on her appearance and grace throughout the evening. She accepted these compliments with her characteristic humility, deflecting praise toward the organizers, who had created such a beautiful celebration, and toward King Charles himself for inspiring the gathering. This ability to graciously receive acknowledgement while redirecting attention to others was another skill Catherine had developed over years of public life. Understanding that appearing too eager for praise could be interpreted as vanity, while appearing too dismissive could seem false or ungracious. The professional photographers had departed hours earlier, but many guests had captured their own photos throughout the evening using personal devices. Catherine knew that some of these images would inevitably end up on social media and eventually in tabloid publications. Regardless of any expectations of privacy, this reality no longer bothered her as it once might have. She had learned to accept that controlling her public image completely was impossible, and that attempting to do so only created frustration and resentment. Instead, she focused on ensuring that her actual behavior and work deserved respect, trusting that authenticity would ultimately prove more valuable than any carefully managed image. King Charles sought out Catherine and William before they departed, pulling them aside for a private moment away from the remaining guests. He expressed his deep gratitude for their support, not just during the evening, but throughout his first years as monarch. Charles acknowledged that the transition following his mother's death had been more difficult than he had anticipated, and that having William ready to step into increasing responsibilities had been essential. He spoke directly to Catherine about her importance to the family's future, describing her as the steady presence that would help guide monarchy through whatever challenges lay ahead. Catherine was moved by his words, but also felt the weight of expectation they carried. She understood that she was being positioned as a central figure in the monarchy's future, that her children's upbringing and her own continued development as a public figure would significantly impact the institution's survival and relevance. This responsibility was sobering, but she drew strength from the knowledge that she would not face it alone. William would be beside her, and they would navigate the complexities together just as they had navigated every other challenge their unique life had presented as they finally prepared to leave Windsor Castle. Catherine caught a glimpse of herself in one of the ornate mirrors lining the corridor. The woman reflected there looked every inch a princess. The pink gown still elegant despite hours of wear, lover's knot tiara still perfectly positioned despite dancing and movement. But Catherine saw beyond the surface image to the person underneath. The former Kate Middleton, who had once doubted whether she truly belonged in this world, and had now proven definitively that she not only belonged, but had become indispensable to its future. The drive back to Kensington Palace gave Catherine time to reflect on the evening and its significance beyond the obvious celebration of King Charles's birthday. She thought about the various conversations she had participated in throughout the night, each one revealing different facets of royal life and the expectations placed on those who served the institution. The discussions with other women who had married into the family had been particularly valuable, providing perspective and solidarity that helped contextualize her own experiences. Knowing that others had faced similar challenges and emerged successfully gave her confidence that she could continue navigating the complex demands of her role. William drove her vehicle himself, preferring this small measure of privacy and normalcy when possible. They talked quietly about highlights from the evening, sharing observations about various guests and moments that had stood out. Catherine mentioned being particularly touched by the speech from the young woman who had benefited from the prince's trust, noting how it exemplified the real-world impact that royal advocacy could have when pursued with genuine commitment. William agreed, expressing hope that their own charitable work would similarly create lasting positive change in areas they cared deeply about. They also discussed the photographs that would emerge from the evening, knowing that Catherine's appearance would dominate media coverage regardless of the event's deeper significance. This reality was something Catherine had learned to accept without resentment. If her fashion choices and physical appearance drew public attention, that could then be redirected towards substantive issues and charitable causes. She was willing to play that role. However, she remained committed to ensuring that she was known for more than just her style, that her legacy would ultimately be defined by meaningful contributions rather than simply looking elegant at. Formal events. Arriving at Kensington Palace, they found their children sleeping peacefully. Having been tucked in hours earlier by their nanny, Catherine and William quietly checked on each child, a ritual they maintained whenever returning from evening engagements. George lay sprawled across his bed, having kicked off his covers in his sleep. Charlotte clutched a favorite stuffed animal, her expression serene. Louis had somehow managed to sleep sideways across his mattress, his small body completely relaxed in that particular way only young children achieved. Looking at them, Catherine felt the familiar mixture of love, protectiveness, and responsibility that parenthood brought. She knew that George's life path was already essentially determined, that he would one day inherit tremendous privilege along with equally tremendous responsibility. Charlotte and Louis would have somewhat more freedom to chart their own courses, but they too would always carry the weight of royal heritage and public scrutiny. Catherine's greatest hope was that they would grow up with strong enough foundations to handle whatever their futures held, that they would find meaning and purpose in their roles while maintaining authentic connections to the world beyond palace walls. After changing out of the pink gown and carefully removing the lover's knot tiara, Catherine felt both relief and a slight sense of loss. The evening had been magical in many ways, a reminder of the extraordinary life she now led and the unique opportunities it provided. Yet there was also exhaustion, the particular fatigue that came from being constantly aware of her presentation and actions, from maintaining grace and composure throughout hours of public interaction. She craved the simplicity of the next morning when she could wear comfortable clothes, make breakfast for her children, and briefly step away from the performance aspects of royal life. William found her sitting in their private quarters, still processing the evening's experiences. He joined her, and they continued talking about King Charles and the complicated emotions surrounding his belated ascension to the throne. They discussed how strange it must be for him to finally hold the position he had been preparing for his entire life, yet to have achieved it through the loss of his beloved mother. The crown had come at a price that no one who truly loved Queen Elizabeth would have willingly paid. Yet Charles was now tasked with carrying forward her legacy while establishing his own vision for the monarchies. Future Catherine shared her thoughts about the moment when Charles had specifically commented on her wearing the lover's knot tiara, recognizing it as an acknowledgement of the complex emotions surrounding Princess Diana's memory. Diana remained a presence in their lives even decades after her death, her influence visible in William's commitment to his children. his determination to modernize aspects of royal life that had contributed to his mother's struggles. Catherine had always been thoughtful about honoring Diana's memory while not being overshadowed by it, understanding that she needed to be her own person rather than trying to replace someone irreplaceable. Conversation eventually turned to their own relationship and how it had evolved. Since their university days at St. Andrews, they had been together for so long now that they could barely remember life without each other. Yet their partnership continued to deepen rather than stagnate. Catherine credited this to their shared values and their willingness to maintain honest communication even when circumstances made it difficult. William expressed gratitude for Catherine's patience during periods when royal duties pulled him away from family, and for her unwavering support when he struggled with the pressures of his position as they prepared for bed. Catherine thought about the millions of people who would soon see photographs from the evening, each viewer forming their own impressions and judgments based on carefully selected images and accompanying commentary. She had long since stopped trying to control public perception completely, understanding that people would believe what they chose to believe regardless of reality. Some would see her as a fairy tale princess living a charmed existence. Others would recognize the hard work and dedication required to fulfill her role effectively. Still, others would criticize her for perceived missteps or for aspects of royal life that they found objectionable. What mattered most to Catherine was that she could look at herself honestly and feel satisfied with her contributions and conduct. She knew she was not perfect, that she made mistakes and had areas where she could improve. But she also knew that she brought genuine effort and care to her work, that she strived to use her platform responsibly, and that she was committed to being the best mother, wife, and public servant she could be. This internal knowledge provided foundation that external praise or criticism could not significantly shake before finally sleeping. Catherine checked her phone briefly and saw that photographs from the evening were already circulating online. The images showed her in the pink gown and tiara, smiling and engaged with various guests, dancing with William and sharing a warm moment with King Charles. The comments beneath the photos ranged from effusive praise to harsh criticism, a reminder of the polarized nature of public opinion regarding the royal family. Catherine read a few comments from both ends of the spectrum, then put the phone away, choosing not to let others' opinions dominate her thoughts about what had been a genuinely meaningful evening. The morning after King Charles's birthday celebration arrived with typical British weather. Gray skies and light rain, creating a cozy atmosphere at Kensington Palace. Catherine woke early despite the late night, her internal clock adjusted to years of early mornings with young children. She lay quietly for a moment, listening to William's steady breathing beside her and thinking about the previous evening. The magic of the celebration felt distant now in the gray morning light, yet its significance remained. She had witnessed and participated in a moment that would be remembered as part of the royal family's ongoing story. A celebration that marked both personal milestone and institutional continuity. Getting out of bed carefully to avoid waking William, Catherine wrapped herself in a comfortable robe and made her way to the kitchen. One of the household staff members was already preparing breakfast, but Catherine preferred making tea herself in these early morning hours. There was something grounding about this simple domestic task, a connection to normalcy that kept her anchored despite the extraordinary circumstances of her life. She sat at the kitchen table with her tea, watching rain streak the windows and enjoying the quiet before her children woke and the day's scheduled activities began. The morning newspapers had arrived, and Catherine glanced at them with practiced detachment. As expected, photographs from the birthday celebration dominated the front pages. The pink gown and lover's knot tiara featured prominently, with headlines ranging from admiring to analytical to critical. One publication praised her elegance and presence, describing her as the modern face of the monarchy. Another took a more cynical approach, questioning the appropriateness of such lavish celebrations during economically challenging times for many British citizens. Catherine had learned to expect this range of coverage and to not allow either extreme to affect her self-perception or her commitment to her role. She read one article more carefully, finding it reasonably balanced in its assessment of the evening and the current state of the royal family. The piece acknowledged both the challenges facing the monarchy in maintaining relevance in contemporary society and the genuine good work being done through various royal charitable initiatives. Catherine appreciated this more nuanced perspective, recognizing that thoughtful criticism and honest analysis serve the institution better than either blind adoration or reflexive hostility. The royal family's continued existence depended on demonstrating value to British society, and that value needed to be real rather than merely performative. The sounds of small feet running down the hallway announced her children's arrival before they burst into the kitchen. Charlotte reached her mother first, climbing into her lap and demanding to hear every detail about the party. Louis followed close behind, more interested in breakfast than the previous evening's events. George appeared last, trying to project the mature composure he felt appropriate for his position as future king, but unable to completely hide his childish excitement about his grandfather's celebration. Catherine hugged each of them, grateful for these moments of pure family connection. She told them age-appropriate stories from the evening, describing the beautiful decorations, the delicious cake, and the music and dancing. She emphasized the love and respect everyone felt for their grandfather, explaining how many people had come to celebrate him because of the good work he had done throughout his life. Catherine used the opportunity to reinforce values she and William were working to instill in their children, connecting the previous evening's celebration to larger lessons about service, responsibility, and using privilege to help others rather than simply enjoying its benefits. William joined them for breakfast, and the family spent a relaxed morning together before the day's obligations required their attention. This balance between public duty and private family life was something Catherine fought to maintain, understanding that her children needed her presence and attention regardless of her royal responsibilities. She had watched other royal families struggle when duty completely overshadowed family, and she was determined not to repeat those patterns even when it meant disappointing people who felt she should be more constantly visible in public roles. Later in the day, Catherine received a handwritten note from King Charles, thanking her for her presence at the celebration and for bringing such grace and warmth to the evening. He wrote about watching her interact with various guests throughout the night and being struck by her genuine interest in people's lives and work. The note concluded with expressions of confidence in her and William's future leadership, describing them as exactly the partnership the monarchy needed for the challenging decades ahead. Catherine tucked the note away carefully, knowing it would become a treasured memento of this period in her life. She spent the afternoon working on upcoming engagements related to her early childhood development initiative. This work had become deeply meaningful to Catherine, representing her attempt to make lasting positive impact beyond the ceremonial aspects of royal life. She reviewed research findings about childhood development and discussed strategies with advisors about how to most effectively use her platform to raise awareness and inspire policy changes. These planning sessions energized her in ways that formal events rarely did, providing a sense of purpose and contribution that went beyond simply appearing elegant at celebrations in the evening. Catherine returned to the photographs from King Charles's birthday one final time before definitively moving forward. She studied them not with vanity, but with analytical interest, assessing how she was being presented and perceived. The images captured moments throughout the evening, one telling part of the story, but none capturing the complete reality of the experience. She saw herself laughing with other guests, dancing with William, speaking earnestly with King Charles, and standing alone in that moment of reflection by the window that had already become iconic. Looking at these photographs, Catherine recognized both the woman she had become and the journey that had brought her to this point. The nervous young woman who had once wondered whether she truly belonged in this world seemed like a different person. Yet Catherine could trace the continuous thread connecting that earlier version to her current self. She had grown not by abandoning her essential nature, but by developing confidence in her own judgment and value. She had learned when to defer to protocol and tradition and when to trust her instincts and push for different approaches. As night fell again, Catherine checked on her sleeping children one more time, a ritual that bookended her days regardless of what occurred between morning and evening. Standing in their doorway, she thought about the legacy she and William were creating, not just through public service, but through the values and foundation they were providing these three young people. The pink gown and tiara from the previous night had been returned to storage, but the experiences and connections from that evening would remain part of her ongoing story. Catherine understood that there would be many more formal celebrations in her future, more opportunities to wear beautiful gowns and valuable jewelry while representing the royal family at significant occasions. Each event would be photographed and analyzed, judged and critiqued by millions of people with varying perspectives on the monarchy's role in British society. But she also understood that these ceremonial moments, while important, were not what would ultimately define her legacy or determine her value. As a member of the royal family, what mattered more than any single evening, no matter how spectacular, was the consistent dedication to meaningful work, the authentic care for people's well-being, and the commitment to using privilege responsibly. These principles would guide Catherine through whatever challenges and opportunities the future held. Whether she was wearing a tiara at Windsor Castle or comfortable clothes in her private quarters, whether cameras were documenting her every move, or she was simply being a mother to her children and a partner to her husband, the celebration of King Charles's 75th birthday would be remembered through the photographs capturing its elegance and significance. But for Catherine, its true meaning lay in the relationships strengthened, the values affirmed, and the quiet confidence gained from successfully navigating yet another important chapter in her extraordinary life. The pink gown and lover's knot tiara had helped her shine brightly throughout the evening, but the light they reflected came from within, from the woman she had worked hard to become and continued striving to be.